All right. Turning your Bibles, if you would, to Joshua chapter 2, if you have a Bible with you. And today we're continuing our Advent series that we began last week. Took a break from our series on Revelation we'll come back to in January. For a 4-week series on the extraordinary women in the genealogy of Jesus. And if you remember last week, who did we cover? Tamar. And these are all found in Matthew chapter 1, by the way, in the genealogy of Jesus. We wouldn't expect to see any female names there in a traditional genealogy, but we find 5 women. Tamar. Today we'll cover Rahab. Anyone know the others? Nope, not Martha. Ruth? Bathsheba? Yeah, Mary, the obvious one, right? Mary. And it's a 4-week series, but the reason there's 5 is because one of those, Mary, we cover on Christmas Eve. So 5 women in the genealogy of Jesus. And this morning we look at Rahab, and her story is found in the 2nd chapter of Joshua. So I would invite you, if you're willing and if you're able, whether you're at home or in person, to stand with me in honor of God's word as I read aloud. Then Joshua, son of Nun, secretly sent 2 spies from Shittim. Go look over the land, he said, especially Jericho. So they went and entered the house of a prostitute named Rahab and stayed there. The king of Jericho was told, look, some of the Israelites have come here tonight to spy out the land. So the king of Jericho sent this message to Rahab. Bring out the men who came to you and entered your house, because they have come to spy out the whole land. But the woman had taken the 2 men and hidden them. She said, yes, the men came to me, but I did not know where they had come from. At dusk, when it was time to close the city gate, the men left. I don't know which way they went. Go after them quickly. You may catch up with them. But she had taken them up on the roof and hidden them under the stalks of flax she had laid out on the roof. So the men set out in pursuit of the spies on the road that leads to the fords of the Jordan. And as soon as the prisoners had gone out, the gate was shut. Before the spies lay down for the night, she went up on the roof and said to them, I know the Lord has given this land to you, and that a great fear of you has fallen on us, so that all who live in this country are melting in fear because of you. We have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to Sihon and Og, the 2 kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan, whom you completely destroyed. When we heard of it, our hearts sank, and everyone's courage failed because of you. For the Lord your God is God in heaven above and on earth below. Now then, please swear to me by the Lord that you will show kindness to my family, because I have shown kindness to you. Give me a sure sign that you will spare the lives of my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and all who belong to them, and that you will save us from death. Our lives for your lives, the men assured her. If you don't tell what we are doing, we will treat you kindly and faithfully when the Lord gives us the land. So she let them down by a rope through the window, for the house she lived in was part of the city wall. Now she had said to them, go to the hills so the pursuers will not find you. Hide yourselves there 3 days until they return, and then go on your way. The men said to her, this oath you made us swear will not be binding on us unless when we enter the land, you have tied this scarlet cord in the window through which you let us down, and unless you have brought your father and mother, your brothers, and all your family into your house. If anyone goes outside your house into the street, his blood will be on his own head. We will not be responsible. As for anyone who is in the house with you, his blood will be on our head. Hand is laid on him. But if you tell what we are doing, we will be released from the oath you made us swear. Agreed, she replied. Let it be as you say. So she sent them away, and they departed. and she tied the scarlet cord in the window. When they left, they went to the hills and stayed there 3 days until the pursuers had searched all along the road and returned without finding them. Then the two men started back. They went down out of the hills, forded the river, and came to Joshua, son of Nun, and told him everything that had happened to them. They said to Joshua, "The Lord has surely given the whole land into our hands. All the people are melting in fear because of us." Let's pray. Father, help us to better understand what's going on in this passage, especially with this woman, Rahab. And Father, make it clear what you're inviting us to do in response. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you. You may be seated. There are 5 women mentioned in the genealogy of Jesus, as I mentioned a moment ago. Most of these women are not even Israelites. And most of these women are associated with sexual scandal, right or wrong. And so we learn a lot when we look at the women involved in the story of Jesus' life. The sad thing about doing a series like this is that when we take a passage like Joshua 2, we take it out of context. We don't know what happened before. We don't get to see what happens right after. We did go through Joshua at one time in our church, and typically what we do at the Oasis is we go through books of the Bible, so we read everything in context. But when we do a series like this Advent series, we take things out of context. So let me put this in context for you. In chapter 1 of Joshua, we're introduced to the main protagonist, of course, is God, and then to the human protagonist, which is Joshua. And God raises up Joshua to take the place of Moses, who has died. Joshua is now the leader of the Israelites, and God tells Joshua, "I'm going to give this entire land, all the land of the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hittites, all of the land to Israel. It will belong to Israel." Now we get to chapter 2, and there's still some question of, is God going to keep his promise? And then 2 Hebrew spies are sent into Jericho, the first city, to do some reconnaissance and to find out what's there. And they go in and they find out through the woman Rahab, they find out that the people of Jericho and all the surrounding towns are quaking in fear because of Israel. They're terrified to come out and meet the Hebrews in battle because they've heard the stories about how the God of the Hebrews, Yahweh, has parted the Red Sea so they could cross and then crush the Egyptian army. They've heard about how they came to the edge of the Jordan and Sihon and Og, the kings of that land, attacked them and they easily defeated them. The Israelites easily defeated these other people. So now all of the people in Canaan are terrified and they won't even come out of their cities because they know the God of the Hebrews is especially powerful. And unlike other gods, he's not the God of a city or a region, but he's the God who took his people out of a foreign nation where there were foreign gods, but he was more powerful than those gods. And he brought them through the wilderness to a new land, and he is more powerful in that land than the gods of that land. So they're terrified. They've never seen a God like this. And the Hebrew spies get the confirmation that they take back to Joshua that we are going to win because the people are melting in fear. But I want to focus today on Rahab, who's the most important figure in chapter 2, which is odd for so many reasons. For one thing, women are usually not the most important figures in ancient times. And she's not just any woman, she is a Canaanite. She's not an Israelite. She worships other gods and goddesses. Her religion is totally wrong. She may engage in things like human sacrifice. She engages in practices that are heinous. And she's a prostitute. Now, some Jewish leaders later said, you know what, it's not clear that she was actually a prostitute. That word could actually be translated innkeeper. So maybe she was just an innkeeper. But I think they protested too much. Because when we look carefully at the story of hostels in this era, they were seedy places, right? They weren't Holiday Inns. This isn't the Ramada. Nobody here is staying at the Hilton. In those days, they didn't really have hotels very much. If you went to a town, you relied on the hospitality of the people that lived there. And if you had friends, that was good. If you didn't, you had to rely on strangers to take you in. There was rarely a place for travelers to stay that was earmarked for travelers. So when there was a hostel here and there, they were pretty seedy places with seedy clientele and seedy owners. And in the New Testament, Rahab is mentioned twice. We'll look at both of those in a moment. And in the 2 times she's mentioned in the New Testament, the word prostitute in Greek clearly means prostitute. So the reality is she's probably running a bed and breakfast with extra services, right? You can get a warm bed or you can get a really warm bed. Really just depends on how much you're willing to spend. That's the kind of person Rahab is. That's her story. That's where she comes from. So one of the things we learn about right here is very important. God welcomes anyone who's willing to trust him. You know, it doesn't really matter where you've been, what you've done. It doesn't even matter what you currently do for a living. She's a prostitute at the moment God meets her. She hasn't cleaned up her life. She hasn't gone and fixed things up. She's not cleaned up. She is a Canaanite prostitute. She's the last person you would go into Canaan hoping to recruit to belong to your extended family and faith. But she's who God picked. Because God rarely picks the one we would pick. The truth is, what separated her from everybody else in her village was one thing: faith. Listen to this. She is mentioned in 2 places in the New Testament. One is Hebrews 11, which says, by faith, the prostitute Rahab, because the spies, was not killed with those who were disobedient. She's mentioned in Hebrews 11, the roll call of faith. Isn't that cool? Rahab, a Canaanite prostitute. She's in the roll call of faith. She becomes the ancestor to King David and the ancestor to Jesus. And why did God pick her to be the heroine of the story and to be an important figure in the Messiah's life? Because she trusted in God. That's what faith means. She trusted in God. That's it. That's all that sets her apart. She was loyal not to her own gods and goddesses. She was loyal to the God of the Hebrews. And the God of the Hebrews remembered her loyalty. Rahab had the wrong religion, wrong family, wrong past, and wrong career. It was all wrong. She checked all the wrong boxes. But God accepted her as his own for one reason: she trusted him. That's really good news for us. That it doesn't matter what your story is or where you are in your story. It really doesn't matter. God's not picky. He just wants people who will trust him. That's it. He's loyal to those who trust him. Let me talk to you a moment about presidential pardons. You'll probably hear a lot more about this between now and the end of January, because it's really common at the end of a term for presidents to pardon a lot of people. Bill Clinton, in his last day in office, pardoned 140 people. That's a lot of people. So far, Donald Trump has pardoned 29 people. Now, presidents pardon people for different reasons, and sometimes it can be controversial. In fact, the most controversial pardon was which one? Anybody that wasn't in first service now? What's that? Nope, not the most controversial pardon. The most controversial. Yeah, Gerald Ford pardoned Richard Nixon before Richard Nixon was even charged with anything. And some people think it cost Gerald Ford the election. That was really controversial. Well, one of the most recent pardons was the pardon of a guy. Anyone know the most recent pardon? There have been 29 pardons. Yeah, Michael Flynn was the most recent. And he had been the national security advisor for 22 days, one of those short-lived appointments. And he resigned, and he was charged with lying to the FBI. He eventually pled guilty twice, but he was pardoned. Now, when we think about the presidential pardon, we forget that there's more than one power the president has that are in the same company of privileges. One is the pardon, which, by the way, only means that you can have your civil liberties restored. So most of the time when you're pardoned, you've already served your time. Now you can vote again, which, yay, I guess. But that's not as significant as another power called commutation of sentence. Now, that's way better, because let's say you have a 20-year sentence and you're in year 1, If the president commutes your sentence, which they can only do for federal crimes, by the way, governor can do it for state crimes. If you have your sentence commuted, that means you can just go free. After however much you've served, it's as if you've served your entire term. You can just, so if you get the pardon and the commutation, that's like winning the lottery. And presidents give that out for different reasons. Sometimes they will give out a pardon and a commutation of sentence for someone because that person has lived an exemplary life, or maybe they were innocent, or maybe it was unfair, like Jack Johnson, the boxer, who was pardoned. But sometimes it's just for politically expedient reasons, meaning it's nothing more than you were loyal to the president. You didn't rat him out. Now you're rotting in jail for it, and he kind of sort of owes you, right? That happens all the time, both parties. Michael Flynn was probably one of those cases, right? Where he kept his mouth shut, and now he gets rewarded. Here's the good news. God pardons too. For the same reason. He rewards those who are loyal. So Rahab the prostitute traded in her family, her city, her country, her home. She risked her life for the God of the Hebrews, and he pardoned her. And he commuted her sentence. And he made her an Israelite. Here's the good news. It doesn't matter where we've been or what we've done. If we are loyal to the God of heaven, he is far more loyal back. And no one is more loyal to those who side with him. And no one has more power than the God of heaven. Well, that's the first thing we learn. But let me tell you something about faith. Faith isn't easy. Faith seems simple, right? She trusted God, and he was loyal to her. But trusting God is risky. Write this down. Trusting God requires courage, which Dustin talked about with the kiddos a moment ago. Trusting God requires courage to risk what we have. There is no way to have faith, which is trust, without risking what you value. It's not possible. Courage requires it. Courage is a part of faith. And like Dustin said, courage is not the opposite of being afraid. Courage is doing the right thing even when you are afraid. Just like Rahab. Rahab showed remarkable courage, and she gambled. She took a huge risk. What did she risk? Listen to this. She rejected her religion. She had to reject her religion. She chose Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews. She rejected her nation. Her city is her nation, by the way. She rejected her identity. This is where she was born. This is where her friends live. This is where she goes to the pub. This is where she goes to the restaurant. Like, this is her life. This is her identity. This is who she is. She also risked capital punishment because she lied to the king. This is like a mayor with superpowers, right? The king of her city. She lied. If she had been caught hiding these two spies, these two scouts, she would have been put to death immediately. She risked all of that because she believed the Hebrew God was going to win. She risked everything she had, but she was no fool. I mean, she did the math, right? She said, well, let's see. The God of the Hebrews kills everyone who opposes his people. He can part oceans. He controls the climate. And he can defeat people without them showing any effort at all. So we're dead. We're dead. And her countrymen knew it, right? All the Canaanites knew it. They're like, we're dead. She's like, okay, we're dead. But it just so happened that two Hebrew spies came to her brothel. Which, by the way, what were they doing at a brothel? You know, I think that's why Jewish leaders want us to think she was just an innkeeper, because then there are a lot more questions, right? Well, why did they pick the brothel? Did they just enjoy a nice bed, or were there amenities? Like, we don't know. Like, it's one of those things like, I wonder what was going on there. But it doesn't matter. They're not the stars of the story. The star is Rahab. So two Hebrews come to spy out the land, and she knows they're going to win, but she realizes she has the opportunity to save their lives and hers. She goes back up and she goes, okay, I've sent them in a different direction. They're not coming after you. The gate's shut. I can let you out my window. I can tell you where to go for safety. But here's the deal. I don't want to get dead. Furthermore, I want to spare my mom and my dad and my brothers and sisters and their wives and their kids. I want all of my nieces and nephews to be spared. I want all of us to live. And they said, deal. That's a deal. Now, here's the math. I'm interrupting and sitting here until the Israelites show up, and then I'm certainly dead. Or I can take capital punishment, and I may be dead. So certainly dead versus maybe dead. That's pretty easy math, right? She wasn't stupid, guys. She did the math. She said, God is trying to win. I might as well risk everything to join the winning side, because then I lose nothing I wasn't going to lose anyway. And I will gain what I would have lost, right? Would have lost. That's pretty good math. So understand this. She risked everything she had, but she was not a moron. She risked everything she had because she believed all her heart. God is on the throne, and he will be the victor. And I might as well abandon my home and side with him. Think about that. We do this all the time, don't we? We do this kind of a cost-benefit analysis on a regular basis. So I'm the father of a whole bunch of daughters and one son. And when I interact with my kids, a lot of times I hurt their feelings. A lot of times. And so on a pretty regular basis, I'm having to go meet with them in private, admit that I messed up, ask for their forgiveness, and I hate it. I hate it. I do it all the time. I think God, it's like God knew what he was doing, right? He's like, David, you're not nearly sensitive enough. I'll just give you a slew of daughters. We'll just change your heart. It's going to take decades, but God's patient. So he brings me all these daughters, and I'm constantly having to deal with my stuff. Now, the temptation I have is to just withdraw and pull away from my kids and to hurt them less. See, if I engage with them less, I'm going to hurt them less. And if I hurt them less, I hear about it less. In the short term, I'll be honest with you, that is very desirable. I'm not going to lie. There is a temptation in me to emotionally withdraw from my kiddos sometimes. But then I remember, because I do so much soul care with people that are the product of parents who pulled away, I think to myself, you know what? I'm more terrified of pulling away. Because if I remove myself emotionally from my kiddos, I'm going to do far more damage to them in the long haul, and I will have lost that which mattered most to me. The consequences of withdrawing in the short term are great. In the long term, they're horrible. And so I consistently have to make a conscious decision to offer myself anyway, knowing I'm likely going to regret it in the short term. But we have to do that math all the time because faith requires it. Faith requires that I risk what I value. What do I value? Well, my comfort. I value my comfort. Well, what do I value more? People. I value people more than my comfort. And we always have to do that. We have to be willing to risk what we value if we trust Jesus. Constantly. Now, we get far more in return, but there's always a risk. So why would we do it? Why would we do it then? Well, we're going to talk about that after our intermission. So we're going to take a quick 3-minute break. 3 minutes. Feel free to get up. There are drinks over here, restrooms to the back. If you're at home, do what you want. And we'll be back in 3 minutes to finish up. So, one thing we learned from the story of Rahab is that God welcomes all who trust in him. But we also learned that trust requires taking risks. It requires courage. It requires giving up something that you value, but not for no reason at all. Reason. So you can write this down. Trusting God risks what we value. This is the rest of the sentence for those who are vulnerable. We risk what we value for people who are vulnerable. We don't think only of ourselves. I've often made the distinction at Oasis between selfish and self-interest. Let me do that again. I think this is good. I don't think you can ever talk about this enough, okay? So everyone out of every single person. Self-interest is not a bad word. It's a neutral word. Self-interest means whatever you do because you think it's in your best interest, either immediately or ultimately, directly or indirectly. Now, everybody acts out of self-interest. Rahab acted out of self-interest, did she not? She was no fool. Now, selfish is a bad word. Selfish means this. Selfish means acting out of self-interest without regard to how your decisions impact others. Now, that's not good. Unselfish, therefore, which is good. Unselfish is good. Unselfish is when we act out of self-interest, but we also consider the impact on others. And I would even go so far as to say, not just taking into account how my decisions impact others, but tying my happiness to others. Jesus of Nazareth taught us to do that. Jesus, the Son of God, taught us that we win when other people win. And so actually being unselfish is in your best interest. We win when everyone wins. Well, Rahab took risks to save not just Rahab, but to save others. The other passage where she's mentioned in the New Testament is James 2:25, where he's talking about the fact that all people who trust God live in such a way that their life is evidence of what they believe. There's always evidence to faith. Here's what he says. In the same way, was not even Rahab the prostitute considered righteous for what she did when she gave lodging to the spies and sent them off in a different direction? And of course, the answer would be yes. Rahab proved her faith by her deeds. She trusted the God of Israel as the true God. And the way we can see that in her life is that she protected the two Hebrew spies, let them down from a window, and gave them good advice to avoid the normal route home. But she didn't just save the Hebrew spies, did she? She saved her whole extended family. She said, hey, I don't want you just to spare me. I want you to spare my mom and dad. While we're at it, my brothers and sisters, and while we're at it, their spouses and their kids. Hey, I want them all saved, okay? I want them all to avoid death. Well, the two Hebrew spies were not in a very strong position to negotiate, right? What could they say? No! Okay, well, then we all die. So they're like, deal. They were in a place to make deals. Would you agree with that? She had the power of life and death over them. She's like, I want you to spare my whole family. Would you spare my whole family? As long as they're in this tiny little house and you have that red rope outside on the window to let us know you're in here. Yeah, I guess so. So Rahab protected the Hebrew spies and her entire extended family. She looked out for those she loved who were in serious danger. You know what kind of person says, you know what, I'm glad I'm going to heaven, but the rest of the world, including my family, they can just go to hell. I don't really care. Like, they can all die. I don't really care. You know, I'm good. I'm covered. Like, who does that? I mean, that's foolishness, right? Nobody is okay if everybody around them dies. Rahab was normal. She had a heart. She loved her family. She rescued her whole family from death. The truth is, faith requires that we risk what we value for the sake of those who are vulnerable. You know, a lot of families in our church are my heroes in this sense. A lot of families in our church are part of the foster care program. They fostered adopted, or they've adopted kids through some other means. Tons of families right here in this room and joining us online. Tons. It's all over our church. And that should be an inspiration to all of us, because that's risking your comfort for the vulnerable. And if that's not, I can't imagine what is. A letter went out, and the Arizona Daily Star had an article back November 7th. And they had an article about the foster care system in the paper, and about a letter that the head of the foster care program for the whole state had sent out to parents, begging them to take in more people. Here's the gist of the article. I'll just give you the gist of the article. Because of COVID-19, the demand for foster care has actually risen. Prior to COVID-19, do you know, if you were here in the first service, do you know who are the people that were most likely to report abuse in the home before COVID-19? Teachers and school staff. Well, that's changed, right? So now people are in the homes of their abusers more of the time, and they don't have teachers and teacher staff to turn in the bad guys. So here's what happens. Abuse continues and becomes more serious until, guess who's doing the reporting now? The police. The police. And the police don't get involved until things are really bad. So when they get involved, there's almost always a need to remove kids. So in July, the number of kids removed from homes went up. And in August, it went up again. In September, it went up again. And every month that they've reported, it's gone up even more than the month before. So because of COVID-19, the need for kids to find new homes has done this. Demand has gone up and supply has gone down. Because fewer people are going into foster care because they're afraid of COVID-19. So families are saying, no, we're not prepared at this time to take kids. And the number of kids needing foster care keeps going up. There's over 13,000 kids in foster care in our state, and almost 1,000 a month go in. It's a scary place. And a lot of you have actually been on the front lines, which is awesome. Because this is a perfect example of risking what you value for the sake of those who are at risk and vulnerable. And the need has never been greater. So what's the invitation? Well, I don't know what the invitation is for you, but before we look at the invitation, how about we look at a promise God gives you? Here's something I can tell you with all certainty. God will take good care of us, each of us, when we risk what we value for those who are vulnerable. So if you step out in faith, if you trust God and you take risks, holy risks, if you risk what you value for the sake of others, God is going to take care of you, just like he took care of Rahab. Let's fast forward 4 chapters later. Joshua 6, it says, but Joshua spared Rahab the prostitute with her family and all who belonged to her, because she hid the men Joshua had sent as spies to Jericho, and she lives among the Israelites to this day. You know what? Rahab became an old woman because she bet everything on the God of Israel. She lived to a ripe old age and became the ancestor of David and Jesus because she was faithful to protect God's people. God takes care of those who take care of the vulnerable. God takes care of those who take care of his people. God takes care of those who take holy risks. Here's a great verse to memorize if you haven't already memorized it. Psalm 37:25. Great verse. I was young and now I am old. In other words, I've lived a long time, yet I have never seen the righteous forsaken or their children begging bread. God takes care of the righteous. God takes care of the humble. God takes care of the generous. You can't outgive God. Now, we're not all in the same position. God is inviting all of us to step out and risk something that we value today. And I'm not sure what that is, but I promise you it's going to require you to give up your personal comfort. I can promise you that. Now, for some of you, it may be as simple as God is saying, you know what, you need to become part of a home church. And that's a giant step for you. That wouldn't be for me, but that might be a huge step for you. And that might be exactly what Jesus is inviting you to, like step over the line and be in community. For others of you, you're in a home church, but you're kind of withholding your true self. You know, you're not being vulnerable. You're not offering your heart. You're just kind of like checking things out and being really safe. And maybe God's just saying, hey, spill your guts. Be real. Tell them the truth. Let them know what's really going on in your life. For some of you, that is huge. Some of you, it's just a big deal if you get out your checkbook and write a check. But for some of you, God's asking you to do something else. I don't know what God's asking you, but let me just say this. We should always maintain clear, healthy boundaries, and yet God calls us to risk our personal comfort for the welfare of other people. Let me unpack this. Some of you need to hear the first part of this. Maintain clear, healthy boundaries, okay? Protect yourself emotionally and protect your family. Some people need to be told that. Some of you don't do that, and you know who you are, right? And if you don't know who you are, your family can tell you, right? Your family knows. If you don't know, your family knows. Let's see, anybody elbowing anybody? Like it's probably like a nudge, like they're talking about you. Some of you need boundaries to protect your own emotional health or the emotional health of your kids because you're responsible for the vulnerable who live with you too. However, more of us need to hear the second part of this clause. Because we just use boundaries, healthy boundaries, as an excuse, as a reason not to risk our own personal comfort. Well, I take care of my family. You're not going to take care of my own. And that's true. But are you using that as a ruse to protect your comfort level? Because I can promise you, Jesus isn't interested in your personal comfort. If he was, he's doing a lousy job, right? At least in my life. Jesus is clearly not most interested in my personal comfort. And one of my favorite things to say at the Oasis, and this is a good place to say it is, it's not about you, right? It's about us. And us is bigger than the people who live in the four walls with you. For Rahab, she realized us includes the Hebrews. Us included her whole extended family. Us is pretty big. There are a lot of people struggling in ways you are not. And to whom much is given, folks, Jesus said, much is required. And there's a lot of required of us, a lot required of us. And in this season of Advent in 2020, more than other seasons of Advent, we look around and see people who are struggling in ways we are not. And the invitation is that we risk our personal comfort, that we live more simply, that others may simply live. That's the invitation from Rahab. Let's pray. Father, help us to have courage this morning and this week to risk some of our personal comfort for the sake of those who are vulnerable, who are at risk, who are struggling, who need someone to stand in the gap for them. Father, I don't know where each person is, and I don't know what the invitation is, but I know you're inviting us to risk our comfort out of love for you and compassion for the weak. Father, give us courage to step out in faith and to be your hands and your feet and to obey the voice of Jesus, our Master and King. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.